Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of a program, rather, of Ad Petri Sedem, where we discuss topics relating to Catholicism and modern culture. This Substack and podcast is under the patronage of Saints Peter and Paul and Pope St. John Paul II. My name is Ishmael Adibo. I'm the chief editor of this Substack, and we're delighted to have your company today. You can find us at adpetrisedem.substack.com. I'll leave that in the show notes. We also have a YouTube and Instagram channel, which I will provide links to as well for you to access online. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome yet another bishop, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, who is the Archbishop of San Francisco. I brought him on today to discuss his experience with the church's liturgy and his founding of the Benedict XVI Institute. But I will just go over his a brief bio relating to his priestly and episcopal career. So Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone is the Archbishop of San Francisco, a native of San Diego with Sicilian roots. He earned a bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of San Diego before studying in Rome at the Pontifical Gregorian University. There he received a degree in sacred theology and later a doctorate in canon law. Ordained a priest in 1982, his career has balanced pastoral work, including as a pastor on the U.S.-Mexico border, with high-level Roman curial service. Notably, he spent 7 years at the Vatican serving on the Apostolic Signatura, the church's highest court. His episcopal journey began in 2002 when he was appointed by Pope St. John Paul II as Auxiliary Bishop of San Diego. He was later appointed by Pope Benedict XVI as Bishop of Oakland in 2009 and installed as the Archbishop of San Francisco in 2012. He's an active member of several U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops committees focusing on family life and canon law. On a personal note, the Archbishop is a lifelong jazz enthusiast and enjoys swimming, hiking, and following professional sports. Your Excellency, welcome to the Substack.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, I went over your bio and reading up on you before we did this interview. I found it interesting that while you were in Rome studying at the Gregorian University, you were students of Cardinal Burke, who we had on the podcast recently. How was that for you?
Yes, it was quite well. I'm very grateful, and I've been blessed to know him for a very long time. When I was doing my canon law studies, I lived at the Graduate House for American Diocesan Priests, studying there the Casa Santa Maria,
Mm.
which is right next door to the Gregorian University. And the Gregorian has an additional course some students choose to take to specialize in tribunal work, specialization in jurisprudence. There are additional seminars that are done within the doctoral cycle. That then Monsignor Burke would come from La Crosse, Wisconsin, his diocese, to teach one of those seminars, and he would stay at the Casa. So when I began my canon law studies, I got to know him when he would come for the month of February when he taught his seminar. Then I took that course, and so I had him as a professor as well. And so I had him as a professor. That was a great blessing. I got to know him. We became friends and have stayed in touch with him ever since.
Of course. And I know recently you were down to a shrine that he founded, the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, for a special mass for the Feast of Our Lady of the Snows. We'll talk about that in a moment. But just relating to your journey to the priesthood, and did you always have an interest in canon law?
No, that's not what I would have elected to study.
Yeah.
I I would have liked something more of a biblical or historical take. I was interested in biblical studies. I did uh, I did the first year of the biblical theology degree actually before I was ordained a priest. But I was ordained in 1982,
Mhm.
and the revised Code of Canon Law was promulgated in 1983. So bishops all over the world were sending priests to study the new Code of Canon Law. So I was being recently ordained, and having studied already at the Gregorian, I was tapped to return to the Gregorian to get my doctoral degree in canon law and be well versed in the new Code of Canon, what was then the new Code of Canon Law.
Of course. There's a phrase that priests always use whenever it's something along the lines of "you go where you're sent."
Yeah,
So
seek nothing, turn nothing down.
of course.
And it was providential. As it turns out, I think canon law was a good field for me. I didn't I didn't have any special interest in law, but my mind is good with those kinds of that way of thinking. It's very logical. I understood the concepts, and so and the way it was taught at the Gregorian, and any decent canon law faculty teaches it with in a theological kind of a way. It was really kind of like studying ecclesiology, which is
Mm,
probably the area of theology that most interests me. So it turned out to be providential. I was well suited for it, and it's also been very practical with the things I've been asked to do ever since.
of course. And even in your service as a bishop, I imagine
Yes,
you
certainly,
have to
certainly. Yes.
use your canon law experience a bit. Let's move on to your interest in the liturgy. So, of course, this is what led you to found the Benedict XVI Institute in 2013. But was this of particular interest to you as a young priest, the liturgy?
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. It's one of the things that inspired my vocation,
Mm,
the beauty of the church's ceremonies, and how deeply rooted they are in tradition. I've always had a great love of tradition. Uh, and I realized that with the kind of the varied experience I've had, the need to do something practical to enhance the quality of the way the Mass is celebrated in our parishes. So that was really the original vision behind the founding of the Benedict XVI Institute. I have great love for the liturgy. We have so many treasures that we've been ignoring for far too long. I think we need to retrieve those and apply them in a way that can speak to people today to revive the beauty and the mystery and the awe of how we should be worshiping.
yeah, definitely. And then there seems to be um, a certain, well, without delving into the current debates regarding the forms of the church's liturgy, a sense of recovery of the sacred, of recovery of the transcendence, which, of course, as he said, led you to found this institute. How did you get this institute going?
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question. I had some assistants in my chancery office to write articles of incorporation and get it chartered as a nonprofit corporation. There was a young man who was working for the Archdiocese at the time who was able to assist me in setting up a website and kind of do some initial organization. I formed a board. It was very early on, so we're still trying to vision exactly what are we supposed to be doing and how are we supposed to go about it. And
Mm,
we had some kind of fits and starts. The young man then moved away and took a job somewhere else, and it kind of went into a hiatus for a while. Then I had known Maggie Gallagher for some
mm,
years before. We worked
mm.
on the marriage issue here in California together, and I knew what a brilliant mind she is and her practical skills in organizing as well. So, and she was interested in helping me out and doing something. So I thought this might fit her skill set well. It's an independent organization,
Mm.
and we can work well together. So I asked her to become the executive director of the organization, and then we reformed the board, and we got a lot more cohesion and a more clarified vision, and it sort of took off from there.
Yeah, of course. And I've heard of course, of Miss Gallagher, and she's done some amazing work with the institute. Regarding the founding of the institute, was it pertaining to the liturgical life of your archdiocese, the Archdiocese of San Francisco, that led you to found the institute, or was it just an overall analysis that, oh, something is missing in American Catholic life, and we need to recover that in the church's liturgy?
Yeah, everywhere I went, I experienced that. Yeah, yeah. So the original has kind of taken twists and turns. I envisioned it initially as something for liturgical formation
Okay.
for lay people exercising ministries at the Mass. But I wanted to put an emphasis on music and formation of parish musicians. Um, and so they understand the church's repertoire and also how music has to be integrated with the liturgy.
Mm.
What happened though was we sort of serendipitously went in a kind of not a different route, but a little bit different, tangential route with trying to reclaim the high sacred art and music of the church's tradition. That
Mm,
began with the Mass of the Americas that I commissioned, what was it, 7 years ago now?
mm.
One that I celebrated in La Crosse most recently at the shrine there of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then we began commissioning with our composer in residence, Frank LaRocca, whom I first got to know when I was the Bishop of Oakland. He lived there at the time. Uh, so we took him in as our composer in residence, and then successive masses he composed of its polyphony in the tradition of polyphony, but with kind of a little bit of a more touch of modern musical, but not not in a startling kind of a way or divergent kind of way. It's very
Right.
much within the tradition of polyphony, but we can hear elements that reflect sort of a contemporary theme. So Mass of the Americas being the first one, I asked him, this is when in 2018, December 8th was on a Saturday. On the Saturday before December 12th, the Feast Day of Guadalupe, we have a grand celebration for Our Lady of Guadalupe. So, being Immaculate Conception, Holy Day of Obligation here, our patroness of the United States, I thought I need to do something to hold up Our Lady as the one who unifies God's family. Uh, so I asked him to incorporate the sounds and even the melodies of the popular songs the Mexican people sing to honor
Mm,
Our Lady of Guadalupe, especially the Himno Guadalupano,
mhm.
and to weave that in. So we hear these sounds, and sometimes that melody, La Guadalupana, woven in throughout. So it has like more of a contemporary touch to it, but very much within the tradition of polyphony. Next, I asked, we had started celebrating a memorial mass in November for people who died homeless, being such a critical problem, scourge even that is.
Yeah, definitely.
So I thought this would be another project for Frank, and I asked him to compose a requiem mass for the homeless. So again, the idea is it's polyphony, but I asked him to use musical elements to kind of express life on the streets, the chaos and the fear and the instability and all that. So to use like dissonance and syncopation, things like that.
Mhm.
So we were trying to reclaim this high sacred tradition of music in the church. And then in other branches of art as well, we've had an artist who's we've worked with, Bernadette Karstensen, who lives very close to our cathedral, actually.
Mm,
She's done some paintings. We had a painting, the Requiem Mass for the Homeless has become the Requiem Mass for the Forgotten, all victims who have been forgotten by society, which we were inspired by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in that war. So the victims of the war there, victims of drug abuse, of domestic violence, of human trafficking, so many. So she did a portrait or a painting of those we kind of deemed to be patron saints of the homeless, and other people represent the forgotten. Um, so we're using other elements of art as well. So it is to reclaim this high sacred tradition that when people are exposed to it, they see the beauty of what the church's tradition is. So it sort of opens the door for our people to experience this and to desire it and want to see more of it in their parishes. So, for example, the Mass of the Americas, our composer Frank adapted it for a parish choir. So
mm,
it's a little bit pared down, but it's the same music, and it can be uh, sung by any decent parish choir.
mm,
And it's available online, so any parish choir can access the resource to do it. So, and then I find out some priests or young men being ordained priests have asked it to be done for their first masses. So we begin
mm,
to sort of diffuse it. So that was the original idea. I mean, that was kind of took a twist and turn that it took, and now we've taken on other projects as well. We're focusing on right now our project Guadalupe 2031.
Yes.
So a lot of people don't know Pope Francis asked for 9-year novena to
Mm.
prepare for the 500th anniversary of the apparition of Our Lady at Tepeyac in
Yes.
2031. So we're trying to promote awareness of that, and we've scheduled these celebrations of the Mass of the Americas in different prominent venues, especially under her title as Our Lady Guadalupe, such as the shrine in La Crosse and other significant cathedrals and basilicas in the United States. Most prominently, we have it scheduled for the Basilica in Mexico City, where she appeared
Mm.
on October 7th. So the Memorial of Our Lady of the Rosary will be celebrating the Mass of the Americas there. We also have a home enthronement ritual that people can enthrone the image of Our Lady Guadalupe in their homes. So that's one project. There's another project we're working on as well as the Martyrs of Communism project. We're kind of concerned about how young people are thinking socialism is a good thing and it's
Yeah.
the answer to injustice and inequality.
Yeah.
Uh, People's memories are very short. They
Yeah.
don't know. Not just of the last century, it's still happening now.
Yeah.
I've been told 1 billion people are living under totalitarian regimes right now in the world.
Wow.
The horrendous suffering that it causes.
Oh
So
my
to
goodness.
celebrate these heroes of ours through music and art and literature is another project. And then we're moving on, getting more back on track to kind of the original vision to provide practical resources to parishes to enhance the beauty and dignity of their liturgies, the Reverent Liturgy Project, where we'll be producing some little YouTube videos of some teaching on kind of the theological meaning of it and what the church actually asks us to do, the
Mm.
church's vision for liturgical renewal, which is very often very contrary to what some people think the Second Vatican Council is asking us to do. It's actually very different. And then to have pastors in their parishes who have moved their parishes in this direction by sacred music, the people singing the Gregorian chant, singing it in Latin, as Vatican II asked us to do.
Mm.
Um, and they've enhanced the dignity. They've accommodated people for kneeling for communion, for example. Some have even returned to the outer orientation of the altar, so priests and people facing toward the east during the sacrifice of the Mass.
Mm.
So, how can pastors do this in a way that does not create division and
Mm.
conflict in parish life? There are pastors who have done that, so we want to tap into these pastors to share their practical experience. And then sort of network priests around the country who want to work on this so that they can learn from each other. So these are the projects we're working on right now with the Benedict XVI Institute, and I'm very excited about it. I'm grateful to Maggie for her vision and her practical know-how to make
Mm.
these things happen. And we're just beginning now with this Reverent Liturgy project. I'm very much looking forward to developing this for the sake of, well, the salvation of souls and the sanctification of God's people
Yeah.
and
No,
the glory of God.
yeah, absolutely. And listening to you talk about the Benedict the 16th Institute and all the wonderful work you're doing, it has to be said. This sense of enculturation, a healthy enculturation into the church's music, into the church's liturgy. It has been a point of debate for certain sectors within the church, like, oh, on one hand, there are people saying, oh, there's it should all be about enculturation, and the other side says no enculturation at all. What you've demonstrated with your institute, there's can be a healthy enculturation, with outside cultures, while being faithful to the church's tradition, reflecting to Catholics and those outside, saying, yes, this is our tradition, but it reflects some piece of the world, and by that we hopefully we can invite you to delve deeper into the mysteries of the faith through the liturgy.
The reality is the church is always enculturated. People don't
Mm.
understand what enculturation means now. They think it means the culture that you're in, you take what's in the culture and introduce it into the liturgy.
No.
That's not what it is. It's like you said, it's adapting elements in continuity with the tradition. I'll
Mm,
never forget 5, almost 6 years ago now, when I was with a group of bishops from our region for our Ad Limina visit, the visit that bishops do every several years
mm,
to the Vatican and meet with the different dicasteries and the Holy Father, celebrate Mass in the basilicas. At the this Cardinal Sarah was the prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship at the time.
mm.
And so the bishops got on this topic of enculturation with this idea that, we need to introduce their dances into the liturgy and their kind of style of music and all this. And I'll never forget, he kept his head down, just listening. And then at a certain point, when there was a pause, he lifted his head and he said, enculturation isn't taking what's in the culture and introducing it into the mass. Enculturation is introducing Jesus Christ into the culture.
That's
And when
right.
that happens, everything changes.
Right.
Everything changes. And then he put his head back down. And it was like oracle of the prophet, no more to be said. But it's what the church has always done. I was in India many years ago and, was attended the liturgies in the Syro-Malabar Rite.
Mm,
It's one of the liturgical families of the church with the same elements of any liturgy with, the readings, preparation rite, celebration of the Eucharist at the Mass, all following the same order. All those elements are there, but it's a way that is kind of integrated into the local Indian culture.
mm,
When I asked Frank LaRocca to compose the Mass of the Americas, I gave him that example. I said, so what I want you to do is look at what the Franciscan missionaries did here in California and throughout the Southwest.
mhm,
They, they built mission churches. So they didn't celebrate Mass in camps or in huts where the people, lived or in sweat lodges, right?
mm.
They built a church that's a traditional Catholic church, but it's in a way that reflects the local culture.
That's right.
Obviously, in the materials they used here in California, they used adobe, but in the colors and then this whole school of art that grew up around it. So much so that it begins to transform the culture. Mission architecture is a very popular form of architecture here in California and in the Southwest.
Mm,
Secular buildings use it, right? So this is the example of what enculturation means. So I asked him what the Franciscan missionaries did with the sense of sight with architecture is what I asked him to do with the sense of hearing through music. That kind of enculturate. That's real enculturation.
yeah, absolutely. So, for anyone listening, like enculturation is this sense of incorporating Christ into the culture, and by that changing the whole culture. That's what it is. Focusing on the Institute. Now, the Institute's core vision from their website is that the greatest art, the greatest liturgy is yet to come. Excellency, you've talked about it quite a bit. Some see this as an age of decline, decline in interest in the arts, decline in pretty much everything, culture-wise. Um, what gives you this sense of hope and optimism for the future, and how can your Benedict XVI Institute contribute to that hope?
Yes, that's a good question. First, I want to say we could hear a criticism of why are you focusing on art and on music? There's so much going wrong in our society, war breaking out all over the place, mental illness and depression and the horrendous attacks we were talking about at the start,
Mm,
these mass shootings.
mm,
Shouldn't we be focusing on this? Well, society seems to be splintering apart, but at the Renaissance time, what was going on? Right? So it was a time that the Protestant uh, reform movement that ended up splintering Christianity, and then the wars of religion and all kinds of very very traumatic period of history. The church focused on the arts as a way of unifying and healing and sanctifying. So, so some of the most beautiful art and music the church has produced came from that era, Renaissance polyphony, right? And it's truly beautiful. So it's beautiful in every age and in every culture. It's not time bound. So by focusing on this, the arts form the soul of the people,
yes.
right? That's why in our Martyrs of Communism project, we hasten to point out how totalitarian regimes get control, right? Who are the first ones they go after? The artists, the poets, the
That's right.
philosophers, the priests. These are the ones who form the soul of the society. So
Mm.
a totalitarian regime to get control, they have to strip the people of their soul so that they can get control of them. So it's precisely now that we need to create more sacred beauty for the glory of God. What gives me hope is, and we've been hearing these reports about growing interest in the faith, young people especially coming into the church. Young men especially are interested in Christianity. So I'm encouraged by the interest of young men in Christianity, and that the young people are desiring what is truly substantive. Now we know that the young generation is much more traditional leaning.
Mm.
So I had an interesting observation at the National Eucharistic Congress we held last year in July in Indianapolis. First thing I would say is it was a huge success, and it was a success because it was very spiritually focused. I was a little apprehensive because I can see how these big church events could be just another like big rally,
Yeah.
and celebration thing, but and kind of loses the spiritual effect it's supposed to have. But it had a very spiritual focus. There was perpetual adoration in a church across the street from the convention center, confessions offered throughout, long lines, people waiting an hour or more to go to confession. The liturgies were done with very great beauty and dignity. And they found ways to accommodate all different styles of music in a way that was appropriate to the event. Uh, so it had that spiritual. Why? Well, this was the first major church event in our country that was envisioned and led by what we refer to as the John Paul II generation.
Very true.
So they were formed, really, they were formed by him. And we can see how it's something that was helped to bring people together. What I noticed is, so this would be the older ones of that generation who now like into their 50s. Uh, the younger they are, the more liturgically, traditionally they lean. The younger ones are more interested in like traditional mass and polyphony and that. I think maybe because maybe they're more influenced by Pope Benedict.
Mm.
So I see this appreciation of that of the tradition. Now, what we need to do is help to ground them so it's not something kind of superficial.
Right.
But this is what really gives me hope, is that when young people discover this tradition, the beauty of our patrimony, now sometimes I've heard them be upset. I've heard them say, I discovered this and with what I grew up with, I was deprived of my Catholic birthright.
Right.
But when they discover it and then they draw in close to the church, they're drawn in by beauty, truth comes along with it.
Yes.
It's an honest conversion. They accept the fullness of the Catholic faith, even those hard parts.
Mm.
Their eyes begin to open to the revelation of the truth. And of course, the John Paul II generation, they're influenced by Benedict too with the liturgy, but also by the theology of the body,
Yes.
which gives them such deep insight into the church's wisdom, not only of, sexual mores and marriage and all that, but it has application to so many branches of theology as well. The ecclesiology, Christ the bridegroom, the church the bride, Eucharistic theology. The Eucharist is the body of Christ. So all this nuptial imagery. John Paul has given us such deep insights into this key to understand everything about Revelation. So all this comes together when they're drawn in through the attraction to the beauty of the church's heritage. So I think that's what gives me hope. I think young people, they want authenticity. I believe they see authenticity there with what is true to our tradition. They see authenticity and they hunger for it.
Yes, of course. Um, I remember you mentioned the Mass of the Americas that you celebrated at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception some years ago. And I remember your homily. Now, you said something along the lines of there may be outside criticisms to what we are doing. how much we're investing into the arts, the liturgical music that surrounds this liturgy. And you said something along the lines of course, referencing a scripture passage where Jesus is is anointed at the feet in Bethany just during his passion. And you mentioned that and say, well, the poor, of course, they're sometimes very lacking in material needs, but their spiritual needs will always be fulfilled by a Catholic church nearest to them, that they have all this art and they don't need to spend any money on it. It is there for them. And while they're lacking material needs, they're being formed in the soul. This is why we spend so much in the arts. This is why we invest so much in the arts, so that even for all of these issues, important as they are, we need to form souls. And this is how we do it by helping them appreciate these arts, which lead to transcendent truths of the Catholic faith.
Yes. First of all, I would say the church expends far more resources in helping the poor than in
Of
the
course.
area of the
Of
arts,
course. Yeah,
which is right
yes.
and just. It'd be wrong to ignore the arts altogether.
Yeah.
I always think of that famous homily of St. John Chrysostom when he told that the people they like to donate to give beautiful vessels and ornamentation to the church's liturgies. He said, that's good, but don't ignore the poor. It's more important to help the poor.
Of course.
So you have beautiful vessels to hold the body of Christ, but if you're ignoring your hungry brother, then their gift is meaningless.
Of course.
But yes, we also do need to invest in beauty. So that what you were speaking about is a story I shared. I heard this from an eyewitness. He's now a retired priest in our archdiocese, but he was there at the time. This would be back probably in 1973.
Mm,
Our cathedral, we have one of the first, if not the first cathedral church built to be a cathedral after the Second Vatican Council. The old cathedral burned down in 1962.
mm,
So the archdiocese immediately began a construction of a new one, and it was dedicated in 1971.
mm.
Toward the time it was nearing its completion, there were beginning to be protests about the expenditure of money to
Right.
build a church, because can't this money be spent to help the poor? It was right after that, as maybe a year, at the most 2 years after that, there's an event center below the cathedral church, and they had a gathering to speak about precisely poverty, and they invited Dorothy Day to be a speaker.
Hmm.
And so this was from an eyewitness. He said during the Q&A, someone raised his hand and he said, "Isn't it ironic that we're having this conference to help the poor here in this church when all the money that was spent on this church could have been used to help the poor?"
Mm,
And Dorothy Day said, "There are many kinds of hunger, and there's a hunger for bread, and we have to give the poor bread. But there's also a hunger for beauty. And this is a beautiful place to which everyone has access, from the mayor of the city to the poorest person on the street."
right.
So this is the point that we dignify the poor when we give them access to beauty. Everyone has a hunger for beauty. They should not be deprived of that. And like you said, in the church, they have that gift of beauty at they don't have to pay anything. They just come in and they're fed by the beauty of the church. They should be fed by the beauty of the Mass. My mother grew up in the well, both my parents grew up in the Great Depression.
Mm,
I remember, and their parents were the immigrants from the old countries, and they were very poor and struggling. They had enough to eat, but still they had to stretch to make ends meet.
mm,
She said what she most one of the things she most appreciated back then, they would go after Mass, they'd go back in the afternoon for benediction or vespers or something like that. She said she always enjoyed it because the music was so beautiful.
mm.
I mean, they couldn't afford to go to a concert, but here they had the gift of beautiful music because it was provided by the church. So we dignify the poor by giving them beauty.
This, staying on the topic of beauty, as you know, well, Pope Benedict XVI, while he was reigning as Pope, made it very much an emphasis on his pontificate. Why did you choose him as the namesake of the institute?
Cardinal Ratzinger, then Pope Benedict XVI, has been such a shining light in what is true liturgical renewal. He's really a reference point and inspiration for so many of us. He's given us a lot of deep insights about the church's liturgy, and he's also with a great pastoral sensitivity.
Mm.
I've always been impressed by him with that. A brilliant mind, a mind that can synthesize volumes of deep thought in kind of pithy sentences, but also with a great pastoral sensitivity. So I think that's exactly what we need. We need that intellectual depth, but in a way that is very pastoral to help build up the body of believers.
Yes, of course, and especially with without delving too much into the liturgical debates in the church, there's ever more need for a pastoral sensitivity in enculturating, a healthy enculturation towards tradition and offering the young people the tradition they so crave. How have you seen the reception among Catholics and non-Catholics alike about the work that you're doing?
Well, the ones connected with us love it, and I'm hoping we can build up that sense of continuity that Pope Benedict emphasized so much, that the council be read in the light of a continuity of the tradition. This whole idea of before and after has inflicted a very deep wound in the church,
Sorry.
very deep wound. It's going to take a long time for this wound to heal. There should be no before and after. There should be a continuity in the tradition. And this idea that was maybe the most positive kind of interpretation of that is that, well, that was good for them, but this is now. Well, this is not now. That was what the before the mass now was then. Now we're in a different now than we were then. Something. So the liturgy with this organic development, it attains a certain classic form. Again, if it's classic, it's withstood the test of time. So it's beautiful in every age and in every culture and can speak to every age and every culture. I was invited to attend the consecration of the new bishop of the Orthodox Church of America here in San Francisco. And this was all there. Our liturgies grew up, we have common roots, the Roman and Greek liturgies, right? Byzantine liturgy. And they developed had common roots and then developed on parallel tracks and really attained kind of their classic form around the 13th century. And there was nothing irrelevant about their liturgy. It was very beautiful, very inspiring. Most of it was in English. They did some parts in Greek, um, but is very inspiring and beautiful and uh, spoke to the people. So that's our tradition too. And we need to keep that alive. So we have now a reordered form of the Mass, but so that's the Mass we celebrate the vast majority of the time, but that should be informed by the continuity of the tradition, which would happen if we obey what the Council actually asked us to do.
Right. There's a saying that I hear priests use a lot, say the black, do the red.
Yes.
That's a joke I tell my priests all the time. So now this I reading up on the institute before this interview, this institute seems to be at the forefront of the Eucharistic revival that we were just talking about earlier. How can it contribute to that Eucharistic revival?
We need to me, this is the basic problem. We need to revive a sense of the sacred. We've lost the sense of the sacred. And this plays itself out in a whole wide range of ways. Marriage vows used to be considered sacred. You know,
Mhm.
we used to speak about holy matrimony, human life itself, especially life at the beginning, life at the end. People, if there was a problem, people would rally around to support life. So we see this in our worship. It has to begin in our worship. If we don't have the most important point of sacredness is the worship of God. If it's not there, we're not going to have it anywhere else in life. We need to focus on that. And I see a lot of things kind of seep in to the mentality unwittingly. For example, how people dress for Mass,
Mhm.
all the talking that goes on in church. This really alarms me, even in the most traditional of congregations when I celebrate these traditional Masses.
Mm.
After Mass, people start talking inside of church. That never used to be. Church was a place to be quiet, right? So reclaiming silence, dressing in a dignified way. I love to tell this story. I have many times about when I was a priest in San Diego and I was working in the chancery office. The parish where I was in residence, there was an African American woman of my parents' generation who also had a job in the chancery. So we would take turns driving each other to work. Well, she grew up in southern Louisiana. So she grew up African American in the Jim Crow South. They were poor, subject to oppression, but very Catholic, and they had their Sunday best. As poor as they were, they had a special set of clothes they reserved for going to church on Sunday. So if they could dress well for church, we all can.
And a society as affluent as ours is, we
Yes.
that leaves little room for any excuses.
So trying to reclaim the sense of the sacred, I think, is the critical thing. That's what I think the Benedict XVI Institute is contributing to, reclaiming this sense of the sacred. So we can build a society. Well, God does the building. We have to remember that. We can be cooperators with God, building a society that is conducive to human flourishing. It can only happen if we recognize God at the center of our society.
Yeah. I do have a couple more questions for you as we round up here. So we I like to use this a lot. So in the mass, well, in the ordinary form of the mass, the priest, there's alternate greetings, but there's one greeting that I like a lot. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. How can the liturgy inform the culture? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, well, I gave the example of mission church architecture.
Mm,
Think of the example of music, how the notation of Gregorian chant, then developed the whole tradition of Western musical theory. Uh, and most of all, though, it's when people are well formed in their faith, and the primary point of formation of the faith is Sunday worship. If they're well formed in the faith, they're going to be an influence for the values of the gospel in the spheres of influence when they leave church and go into their workplaces, their schools, the communities with which they interact. They're well formed in the faith. They can be guiding lights to the people they interact with who most need to hear about the truth, beauty, and goodness of the gospel.
we talk about active participation all the time. The liturgy is supposed to assist in that and um, delve for us to delve deeper into the truths of our faith and the power of the Eucharist, which is the source and summit of our faith.
Active participation, we also need to kind of reclaim what that really means.
Mhm.
Of course, it's Pope Pius X who introduced the concept, or the term, I should say, participatio actuosa. He wanted to see so he is riding on the building momentum of the liturgical renewal movement. He wanted to see the Mass as something that the people participate in with heart, mind, and soul,
Mm,
not just in a kind of a exterior, superficial way. And so reclaiming of the Gregorian chant is a music proper to the Roman liturgy,
right.
right? And so he is trying to get away from the orchestrated masses, as beautiful as they are. The Mass should not be a performance. Now, however, I think a lot of people have the idea of active participation is that everyone has to be doing something. And so they're as if there's no place for choral music, right? But the Second Vatican Council spoke about Gregorian chant as the first place of the church's of music in the church's liturgy, but other forms of music can be acceptable if they're consistent with the liturgical action. And it mentions specifically polyphony. Very few parishes can the people sing polyphony,
Mm.
right? But the council acknowledges polyphony as suited to the liturgy. So there is a place for choral music because there's a place for active listening.
Yes.
Listening should be an active thing. If listening were not active participation, we'd have to do away with lectors and everyone read all the readings at Mass. That'd be pretty absurd, right? So there
Right.
is a place for active listening. Um, but it's all to engage the people. The people should be engaged in the liturgical action and follow, being able to follow the Mass and what is happening. So yes, they should sing the Mass parts together, especially the Gregorian chants in Latin, as the Council asked for, as Pope Paul VI asked for in issuing the Jubilate Deo hymnal in 1974.
Mm.
Sent it to all the bishops of the world, asked them to implement it in their dioceses, so it had the simple Latin chants and other hymns, Marian hymns, and Eucharistic hymns. The idea was that there'd be this basic repertoire that Catholics all around the world would know. So wherever they are in the world, they can sing the Mass and the benediction, other ceremonies together. Unfortunately, it never happened. But this was the vision of the Council, riding on the momentum of the liturgical renewal movement. So we need to promote what active participation genuinely means. And there is a place for active listening within active participation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add to participation often happens when you're actively listening. When it seems you're doing the least, that
Yes.
for most people, that's when they do the most. As a final question for you, Your Excellency, now I mentioned earlier at the start of this interview, you recently went out to the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin, to celebrate the Mass of the Americas there. Are there any personal experiences that you remember from celebrating liturgies such as this? And what do you hope will be the legacy of the Benedict the 16th Institute?
The legacy I hope for is reviving the high sacred art tradition that will then begin to influence how Mass is celebrated in parishes all throughout our country and all throughout the world. So I hope that's be basically getting the church back on track with sacred beauty. The church has always been the great patron of the arts, champion of the arts, and creator of the arts that's come from the heart of the church. We need to get back on track with that so we can reclaim what is the church's rightful place in that and orient it toward the glory of God. And that's what my memories are of these masses that I celebrate. They're so deeply moving to me. I kind of get a little bit embarrassed because so often I move to tears because of the beauty of them. And I try to be stoic, but my Sicilian DNA isn't very good at that.
Yeah,
So I always come away renewed and confirmed in the faith.
right. And I imagine as well for well, Sicilian roots aside, for anyone at these masses, it'd be hard not to shed a or tear or two. Well, Your Excellency, being cognizant of your time here, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. And for my viewers, the reason why I really much wanted this interview was to offer all of you this the liturgical renewal that is happening from institutes such as the Benedict XVI Institute, and to invite you to go deeper in your faith with the liturgy as your guide. Well, Excellency, thank you again for your time, and hopefully, this renewal, this renewal that you're at the forefront of leading with the Benedict XVI Institute will continue and hopefully lead to a true Eucharistic revival in our country. So, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, thank you so much.
You're welcome.